Well, it's time to get started on the UPNS merger application video. Let's just go ahead and find the application right here. Take a moment to load. Load, please load. Ah, there we go. Uh, oh gosh. How how am I going to make this video? Hello everybody, my name is Shortline819 and welcome back to Shortline's Rail News and Comment, and today we're going to attempt to dissect parts of Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern's massive merger application. For the uninitiated, this application is the basis on which the government regulators, that being the Surface Transportation Board, will review and ultimately approve or reject the Union Pacific-Norfolk Southern merger, so it's pretty important. I had trouble figuring out exactly how to make this video. The application is 6,649 pages long. I don't have time to cover even a fraction of that in detail. What do I include? What do I leave out? How do I cover this in a reasonable amount of time? So I've decided to provide a brief overview of what's in the application and ask the following question. Does this application meet the STB's Class 1 merger rules? If you want more detail on the specific aspects of the merger, I would recommend reading the application yourself or Trains Magazine's wonderful coverage. Both are linked below. Lastly, other than my own, I'm not going to cover others' reactions to this application. That being said, so far, they've mostly been skeptical or outright hostile. But enough preamble, let's get into it. First, what is in this application? It contains 4 volumes, each dealing with a different aspect of the merger. The first volume contains general information about the merger, a summary of benefits, and a series of statements from key individuals and organizations involved with the merger. The second volume contains statements concerning the merged railroad's market impact, effect on competition, and the benefits shippers could see. It also contains the merged railroad's operating plan and the service assurance plan, which is how the two railroads will integrate and avoid service meltdown during said integration. The third volume is simply a list of shippers, government officials, and other individuals and organizations that have voiced support for the merger. The fourth volume contains additional agreements and exhibits. You shouldn't treat this application as gospel. Take it with a grain of salt. Mergers have a funny way of not quite matching what was promised in their application. Rather, you should treat it as more of a rough blueprint of what a merged UPNS could look like. The STB will be treating the application in a similar manner. Speaking of the STB, what are these Class 1 merger rules I previously mentioned? They are, well, the rules that any Class 1 merger application must meet in order to be approved. These rules are fairly strict. Any merger has to demonstrably be in the public interest in order to receive approval. These rules were implemented in 2001 after the highly disruptive mega mergers we saw in the 1990s. Mainly Union Pacific-Southern Pacific, the Conrail split by CSX and NS, and even an aborted Canadian National BNSF merger in 2000. While the pre-2001 rules judge mergers mostly in isolation, the current post-2001 rules judge mergers within the context of the wider transportation system. The current rules were applied to all mergers between Class 1s, except for one involving Kansas City Southern, which is how we got CPKC. The UPNS merger is therefore the first to be judged under these current rules. So what exactly do these rules require that make them so strict? Several things. Any merger must enhance competition, not simply preserve it. Any merger must have clear benefits which can't be achieved short of merger. A service assurance plan must detail how the two railroads plan on integrating their operations. This is also needed as a guard against service meltdowns. Downstream effects must be factored in. How would other railroads respond to the merger? Would they be forcing the mergers of their own? And there are also several smaller rules relating to employee protection and transnational issues, which I can't really touch on for the sake of time. Let's start with the enhancement of competition. There has been a lot of concern over the anti-competitive effects of UPNS, with a lot of shippers and most other Class 1s fearful that the merged railroad would only use its market power to benefit itself, resulting in reduced competition and higher shipping prices. How does UPNS rebuff this? Well, the two railroads said the merger would actually greatly increase competition through the creation of a highly efficient nation-spanning system that would be in a far stronger competitive position vis-a-vis trucks and other railroads. This is because the merger would create new single-line routings, meaning that most shippers would only have to deal with a single railroad, simplifying railroad-shipper interactions. Elimination of interchanges along the Mississippi River would result in faster transit times and possibly lower rates, since cars don't have to wait days in congested yards anymore. This will allow UPNS to better chase watershed traffic, which straddles the dividing line between the eastern and western railroads. This traffic is currently dominated by trucks, since hauls are currently split among two railroads. The merger would allow two short hauls to be converted to one long haul, making watershed traffic much more attractive to the Class 1s. Well, all of that sounds good to me, as it relates to competition against trucks, but what about other railroads? Well, the main way UP&S proposes doing this is through committed gateway pricing. BNSF and CSX would be allowed to quote rates for shipments between their existing networks and parts of UP&S, meaning they can market transcontinental traffic without going through a merger of their own. If you are a shipper on CSX who ships to a point on UP, you currently have to get a rate from both railroads on their individual length of haul. However, under committed gateway pricing, you would only have to get a single rate from CSX, even if UP&S is handling a portion of the haul. That sounds great. However, committed gateway pricing has a number of serious limitations as currently proposed. Only shippers who are exclusively served by either CSX, BNSF, or a short line with a single interchange partner are eligible. BNSF can only market to the NS side of UP&S, and CSX can only market to the UP side of UP&S. Neither of the Canadian railroads are included. UP&S proposes that committed gateway pricing be eliminated once the STB's 5-year post-merger oversight period closes. This is justified by claiming that the merger rules are only meant to address competition where it will be eliminated, and that committed gateway pricing is meant as an additional guard against merger-induced service disruptions. Now, do I buy this? Not for a second. Having your primary intramodal competitive remedy be a temporary measure seems just really asinine to me. It's also structured in a way where it becomes redundant the moment CSX and BNSF merge. As for overlap issues, UP&S will grant a second railroad access to shippers who are currently served by both UP and NS. All three of them. UP&S will also divest chairs in the Peoria and Pekin Union, the Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis, and TTX, so it's not the majority owner post-merger. Nothing about the overlap in much of the Midwest, though. And that's UP&S's quote-unquote competitive solution. Oh brother, you couldn't get a merger in the 1990s approved of it, let alone today. While I do think this merger would greatly increase competition against trucks, it just wouldn't between railroads as currently proposed. It barely maintains existing competition. Based on the merger rules and shipper sentiment, I and many others expected that any merger would require sweeping concessions to get approved. And while that still might be the case, UP&S doesn't seem to think so anymore. They had initially said that merger-related concessions could cost up to $750 million, but I don't see how these could potentially match that number, so they definitely changed their minds. Plus, UP is being dragged before the STB by BNSF over not following conditions placed upon it during the merger with Southern Pacific. Conditions that UP agreed on voluntarily. How can one expect committed gateway pricing or any other flimsy merger condition to hold unless they have both serious teeth and rigorous oversight? As for the purported benefits of the merger, much of it's just an in-depth repeat of those already touted. Network efficiency, single-line service, watershed traffic. How various types of traffic, such as intermodal, will benefit is also discussed. UP&S additionally state that the merger could shift up to 2 million shipments from truck to rail. All of this adds up to a much stronger, more competitive American economy in UP&S's eyes. Wall Street and other investors, including myself, I do have to disclose that, will greatly benefit from the increased profits, dividends, stock price that the merger will bring. Oftentimes, these do come at the expense of other stakeholders and the railroad itself. Of course, a lot of this isn't actually brought up too much within the application. As for why UP and NS opted for merger rather than partnerships like other railroads, the two railroads say that the kind of large-scale change they want simply can't be done via smaller-scale, often fragile partnerships. Partnerships are great when railroads commit to them, however, their differing interests often mean that they slowly fizzle out. They are also limited to a few select lanes, meaning traffic opportunities are inherently much more limited than in a merger. There is also the Service Assurance Plan, which details how the operations of the two railroads will be integrated and is meant as a guard against any merger-induced service meltdowns, something which Union Pacific has a fairly infamous history with if you know what happened during the mergers with the Chicago Northwestern and Southern Pacific. I'm gonna be honest, this is something I don't feel too confident to comment on in detail, however, it is important, so I will bring it up. UP&S do plan on merging their systems slowly across 6 phases over 3 years. These phases each have subphases dealing with safety, operations, information technology such as dispatching, customer service, and employee training. Hopefully, this will prevent a repeat of UP's past merger mistakes. However, in any merger, some service disruption is inevitably guaranteed, it's just a matter of how much. Moving on to how UP and NS address the downstream effects of their merger. Now, it is blindingly obvious to anyone with a decimal percentage of a brain that BNSF and CSX would have to merge if UP&S gets approved. However, UP&S opt for nebulous language when discussing the prospect. They might merge, they might not, we can't predict it. UP and NS do state that a CSX-BNSF countermerger would deliver the same benefits as their own merger. However, they also point to Berkshire Hathaway's hostility towards any merger as to why BNSF might not buy CSX. UP&S goes far to state that committed gateway pricing would allow BNSF and CSX to continue operating as effective competitors without a merger of their own, which, no, especially considering that UP&S want to put a time limit on that. Now, all of this, we can't predict what CSX and BNSF will do, they might not merge. I suspect is just necessary legalese. UP and NS almost certainly anticipating some big countermerger in response, most likely CSX BNSF. They just can't or won't say it within the application. So that was the Union Pacific-Norfolk Southern merger application. Do I think it matches the Surface Transportation Board's Class 1 merger rules as stands? In this incredibly armchair analysis opinion, not quite. There are some aspects, benefits, and service assurance plan that seem fine to me. However, I don't think the quote-unquote competitive solution proposed, or the downstream effects as tackled, are anywhere near up to muster. Now, does this mean that the UP-NS merger application is dead on arrival? No. If the STB and other stakeholders raise hell enough and UP-NS is willing to listen, I don't see why the application can't be modified. If UP&S are so confident that their application is gold-plated and they don't need to modify it, well, there's always the possibility the STB could reject the merger, barring some extreme outside political influence like from Trump. Now, what happens next is the STB has to read over the entire application and decide if it's complete enough to begin the review process. If it is complete, great, the review process can begin. But if it's not complete enough, then UP&S have to go back, they have to modify it to the STB's liking, and then they have to resubmit it. So that will occur sometime within the next month. Anyways, this has been quite a long episode compared to more recent episodes of this show, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you to Arkansas Locomotive Works, Toaster, DoBear320, Dean1125, and Jackboy317 for all offering up their footage to this video. Additional thanks to Mikey Hikey for allowing me to use some of his images. I am forever grateful for that. And so, I don't know when I'll be back for another video, hopefully sometime later this month for Tramuary, stay tuned. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody. Wall Street and other investors, including myself, have to disclose that, will greatly benefit from the increased profits, dividends, stock price, etc. that the merger will bring. Some people might, see their retirement accounts boosted. Some, Wall Street manager might make a quick buck and then, I don't know, like do coke on the side. Who knows? What is this? This isn't in the script. Why am I saying this? But regardless, I guess that these will often come. I don't know. You want to do drugs, kid? Don't do drugs.